Chapter 4. The Law of Navigation. Anyone can steer the ship, but it takes a leader to chart the course. The biblical character for this law is Nehemiah. When poet Robert Frost wrote, "Something there is that doesn't love a wall," he was commenting on the fact that walls tend to fall down over the course of time when left to the elements. Knowing that, imagine what shape a wall would be after it had been ripped down by a conquering army and then allowed to sit unrepaired for more than a century. That was the condition of the walls surrounding Jerusalem when Hanani returned from there to see his brother Nehemiah in the city of Shushan. A city wall in ruins was a very bad thing in those days. Not only did it leave a city vulnerable to attack, but it also prompted ridicule from neighboring powers. In the case of Jerusalem, the unrepaired wall also gave foreigners a reason to scorn God. And that's why Nehemiah wept, mourned, fasted, and prayed for several days when he heard the news of the condition of the wall. During the 120 years after the walls were torn down by the Chaldeans, literally tens of thousands of Jerusalem's people had looked at the walls and done nothing. Maybe to them, rebuilding the wall seemed an impossible challenge, even though the city possessed plenty of workers. What the people needed was someone to rally them, plan their course of action, and take them through the rebuilding process. What they needed was a leader who could navigate. That's where Nehemiah came into the picture. One of the most remarkable things about Nehemiah is that he could see the problem and the solution even though he had never been to Jerusalem. That's because leaders who navigate do more than control the direction in which they and their people travel. They see the whole trip in their minds before they leave the dock. They have a vision for their destination. They understand what it will take to get there. They know who they'll need on the team to be successful, and they recognize the obstacles long before they appear on the horizon. In fact, navigating leaders have vision unlike that of anyone else. They are able to see first, farther than others see. Nehemiah was able to see the problem even though he was hundreds of miles away from Jerusalem, and he could picture the solution in his head. Navigating leaders are able to see more than others see. Nehemiah knew that the wall could and should be rebuilt, and he knew what it would take to do it. Before he left Shushan, he asked the king to provide him with letters allowing him to gather materials and granting him safe passage to Judah. Navigating leaders are able to see before others see. None of Jerusalem's neighbors wanted to see the Jews rebuild their wall, and several enemy leaders conspired against Nehemiah and the people. But Nehemiah saw the danger coming and planned accordingly. He formulated strategies to defend the city and keep the people working at the same time. In the end, the people needed only 52 days to rebuild a city wall that had been in ruins for 120 years, and they were able to do it because they had a great leader to navigate for them. But Nehemiah didn't discover his purpose to lead the people of Jerusalem until he was confronted with the problem first. In fact, that's the way it works for most godly leaders. They don't have to go looking for something that captures their hearts. Although most people desire to have the vision first, a calling usually comes as a result of obediently seizing an opportunity that is close at hand. The burden precedes the vision for their leadership. In the case of Nehemiah, the report of the feeble condition of the wall created a burden in his heart, and the burden led to his vision to rebuild the wall. However, it was one thing to have a burden to complete a project. It's another to rally an entire city to undertake the task, despite threats and fierce opposition from your enemies. Yet that's what Nehemiah did. Before the actual building process began, he prepared himself and his people by doing 8 things. Number 1, he identified with the problem. When Nehemiah heard that the wall was rubble and that God's name was being mocked, Scripture says he wept. Number 2, he spent time in prayer. Almost immediately, Nehemiah went to his knees to pray. He confessed his own sins and that of the people, then asked for God's favor. Number 3, He approached the key influencers. When Nehemiah boldly petitioned Persia's king, he received not only permission to rebuild the wall, but also resources and support. Number 4, he assessed the situation. When he finally arrived in Jerusalem, Nehemiah surveyed firsthand the challenge that he was facing, personally assessing the damage and planning the project without unwanted interference. Number 5, he met with the people and cast the vision. We don't know exactly how Nehemiah approached the people or with whom he met first, but we do know that he communicated with the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the people who did the work. He shared his vision for rebuilding the wall and the spiritual ramifications of the project. Number 6, he encouraged them with past successes. With a task as daunting as rebuilding of the wall, Nehemiah knew he needed to encourage the people. Scripture says that he told them how God's hand was on him and how he obtained the king's favor and help. Number 7, he received buy-in from the people. Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 18 records the people's reaction to Nehemiah's words. It reads, "So they said, 'Let us rise up and build.' Then they set their hand to this good work." The people had bought in and were willing to dedicate themselves to Nehemiah's leadership and his vision. Number 8, he organized the people and got them working. When the people worked, they didn't do it haphazardly. Nehemiah organized them by family and set them to work according to planned priorities, beginning with the city's gates. A lot of work went into Nehemiah's approach to realizing his vision. He was a great visionary and leader of people, but without careful planning, the wall never would have been completed. You see, above everything else, the secret to the law of navigation is preparation. When you prepare well, you convey confidence and trust to the people. And with the people's confidence and trust, you are capable of leading them just about anywhere. Ultimately, the walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt because of Nehemiah's ability to inspire the people, secure their trust, and strategically lead them where they needed to go. No great task is accomplished without both people to do the work and a prepared leader to guide them. But when there is a convergence of the opportunity of the moment, the need of the people, the purpose of the leader, and the calling of God, even the impossible becomes possible. As you think on the law of navigation and the story of Nehemiah, realize this. Number 1, leaders not only know where they are going, they also know how to get there. Number 2, leaders find purpose in the needs around them. Number 3, a leader follows the carpenter's rule. Measure twice, saw once. And number 4, leaders not only know where they're going, they also take people with them. As you prepare to turn off the tape, take the remaining minutes of your time to think of one project or process that you currently need to guide your people through, and begin brainstorming how you will take responsibility for taking lead in that process. If you want to learn more about Nehemiah and the law of navigation, read his story in the book of Nehemiah.